end with the local government strategy as well. And with 79 local governments across the state, it's nice to know that we're really active and starting that journey in Macedon Ranges with one of 15 to have a reconciliation plan. So that's a promising start. So we're now going to throw it open for further questions and Q&A, but initially, any questions on what you just heard from Nicole and the journey and the work of Reconciliation Victoria, or the issues that Nicole highlighted? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Another wonderful presentation. Look, several times you mentioned the 5 dimensions of reconciliation and how you're going to, and the need to measure them. Could you please remind me what the 5 dimensions are and how you will know when progress is being made along those?
Absolutely, thank you. And so I should just point out, so Reconciliation Australia has its 5 dimensions, so as well as Reconciliation Victoria has its own 5 as well. So they're separate, they're very similar, but in a way it's around equity, it's around integrity in the organisation, it's about addressing racism, how we do that, it's about historical acceptance, and there's one more in there, which I don't think I can remember off the top of my head. I should know it, but I'm pretty sure it's in it's self-determination in there as well. So really, in measuring those, when we come down, and when you have a RAP specialist, an expert, and this is why we say put a dedicated group of RAP specialists around it, because when you're doing your activities and you're achieving your deliverables, you measure them up against these dimensions. And then if you're a real chart person like I am, I love data. I don't know how I ended up being a data, but I think it's because I like facts. And the great thing about being able to measure against the 5 dimensions is that you are able to see where are the bits that we have a constant weak leg in. And for somebody who's written those RAPs, the weak spots traditionally and nearly always are historical acceptance in the deliverables, RAP deliverables. Yep.
Thanks, Nicole. Great question. Councillor Mark Ridgway.
Thanks, Nicole. You made mention of First Nations languages and promoting them through your website, and I was just wondering what will be the role, or what do you envisage the role of language in the work that you're doing, and what steps you'll be taking to, I suppose, promote understanding and awareness of language in terms of what you're doing?
Thank you, that's a great question. And I think what Brent touched on is that there's also a lot unfolding with treaty advancements. There's so much revitalisation of language happening respectfully in community, and so with that we're also being very respectful of, for instance, when we engage with Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, they have also a system now where when there are words that are gifted for us to be able to use, those words are very specific, so unite, respect, but in that usage of the word, we're respectfully, like any other business branding type of thing that we would do in marketing, what we purchase, we're purchasing language, we're respecting the sustainability and movement and valuing the First Nations organisations as they developing business models and structures. We're supporting that, but we're supporting the sustainability of that language and respecting it, because time and time again in local governments we've seen this engage, take, not pay for, and not value. So we're going through a process of those, we procure the languages, we respect it, and we have a usage point, an ongoing usage, but anything we're investing into that sustainability of their organisations.
Yeah, this works. It's the same at Uruk. We've kind of thoughtfully worked with VACL, the Victorian Aboriginal Corporation for Languages, who are doing some really good things, but as you said, still evolving. But we've got 5 kind of words from different traditional owner groups. One, for example, is our Wurruk Chirang, which means kind of public hearing. So we've got 5 different mobs around the state who we've consulted with and got the rights to that. So I think, as you said, Nicole, it's a journey in regards to respecting TOs and the ACOs in that space. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. So when we think about Aboriginal employment and business opportunities, and you mentioned that, Nicole, and that's something we're actively thinking about here with our RAP and the Shire. What have you seen works from your perspective when you think about RAPs and the local governments that you've worked with? And then I'll get a comment from Brent on that.
Yep. So the greatest thing that I have seen is that community attracts community, and so the more safe your workplace is and the more Aboriginal community that would like to work for you, the more that you will continue to find your workforce is building. And I think that it's having a variation of roles as well. So I saw Banyule City Council recently, create a role which was a First Nations elder advisor role. Now, what historically had happened is that council had, just been taking that advice out of an advisory committee capacity and not really been respecting that they would normally pay money to consultants or, legal advice or financial advice, and now finally paying for the cultural advice. So seeing these roles, but also, creating just opportunities, so coming through when you've got the entry-level roles. But I would definitely say what works is to do that cultural safety assessment of your organisation, see where cultural learning is at, and when you're able to do that assessment work, it then determines, okay, well, where are good places to recruit into the organisation? What sort of do we have a dedicated Aboriginal employment strategy? But how are your people and culture teams going to support that strategy as well? So what sort of Aboriginal experts and services and consultants do you need to then work with to develop that dedicated Aboriginal employment strategy? What I see often is that the strategy gets parked in diversity inclusion, and it doesn't allow for those sorts of policy changes to occur with Aboriginal employment strategies. When we put culturally inclusive language into our policies, we're embedding positive cultural change and actually change that we all benefit from. When we have, leave and codes of conduct and so forth with culturally inclusive language in there, we all benefit. So there's that's probably just touching the iceberg. I'd need a few hours to go over more.
That's terrific, thanks, Nicole. Brent, can I get your perspective on this? And I suppose another reflection too, when I've worked in a previous local government was, we would be putting out tenders for jobs, and our First Nations sort of economic arms would apply for jobs, and it was sort of like we were talking a different language, like we were sort of forcing these groups that were finding their feet to conform with our tender processes, and the formula kept saying no. And that's when we had to embark on a different approach, and maybe, it was a bit of cultural safety and assessment, and also not doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So we had to think about it quite differently. Thanks, Brent.
Yeah, personally I've been really fortunate in my kind of professional career in the youth justice space, where we probably didn't have a strong number of Aboriginal kind of employees, but the space was really safe, and that's something that in the RAP groups or kind of committees that I've been a part of, probably the workforces haven't been set up to be really inclusive if an Aboriginal person did come in, it's kind of like I use the analogy of some of the boarding kind of private schools who try and do the right thing and bring kids down from Darwin or wherever it might be, and they come down and it's a complete shock to the system. It's not a supportive environment. And then at VACA and Yuruk, obviously surrounded by a lot of strong Aboriginal staff. But I think you're right. You need to be kind of really creative around what you need and be reflective, which is really hard sometimes when you're just immersed in your day-to-day. And so an example that I think worked really well where, and this is a plug for the school, but I have nothing to do with them, Reservoir East Primary down in kind of Melbourne. I did some workshops with them last year when I was at VACA and Berry Street, and they had a need to kind of engage their Aboriginal families better. They have a pretty strong kind of, and as you said, community brings community. So that school has been known in the school. There's traditionally Thornbury High and Thornbury Primary, who everyone talks about, but this Reservoir East Primary just kept getting stronger and stronger enrolments of mob, and there must have been a reason. So their principal kind of freed up some money in their kind of budget, and they hired a kind of a reception, community outreach, family outreach member 2 days a week. So as you said, it's not just 5 days, 9 to 5, this is how it has to be. And that role's grown over 3 years to kind of be full-time and a bit more in the class and in the classroom and working with families, and really strong. And to have one Aboriginal person, it's now, I think they've got 4 or 5 Aboriginal staff at the school, including 2 kind of fully qualified teachers. So that's something that I think is amazing, that the school took a bit of initiative, they were genuine, and now they're seeing some really good change. So yeah, a bit of kind of what you're both saying, I think.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you. Emerging young leaders. Now, Nicole referenced that. I think tonight we can clearly see that Brent is an emerging or arrived young leader in the space. What do emerging young leaders need to build their capability and capacity to make change, Brent?
Thanks for that. I don't really take compliments very well, but appreciate that. Look, it's a balance, and I don't speak, I'll never speak on behalf of everyone and other Aboriginal people, firstly. So I think it's a balance. Like we speak, and I was at VACA for a long time, for 4 or 5 years, and we were really big in kind of upskilling our staff with their diplomas and kind of degrees to because sometimes in these governments and these kind of things, you probably, you'll get, and it sounds, you'll be respected if you can kind of have some sort of, it sounds, piece of paper to back up what you're kind of talking about, right? So, but we think community, time in community is probably more important than all that kind of stuff, right? So if you can, what we tried to do sometimes at VACA with Arnie Muriel and our kind of leadership was to marry the two up together. So if you can be strong in your community and your identity, that's number one. But if you can kind of add a bit of a Western or mainstream, it's, you know what I mean, it's a balance. For example, we did diplomas of community services, Bachelor of Social Work, those kind of things with our people, but made sure that the content was culturally appropriate and not, how some institutions do their work. So then we have these young kind of community leaders marrying up their cultural experience with kind of this Western model of learning to really enhance their skills when they get to the stage of making change or policy or in meetings with government, and walking in both worlds, I suppose, is the takeaway. Walking in both worlds, and I've been fortunate in my kind of experience to go to university and also, learn at the same time from many kind of generous community members. You're always learning, but I think that's that kind of walking in both worlds and marrying cultural experience with kind of some sort of degree. But yeah, it's a balance. There's no one answer, and that's only my experience.
Yeah.
That was a totally unprompted question. You answered it very well. So well done. Now we're in the process of starting to wrap up the evening. Is there any questions out in the audience that you'll be kicking yourself you haven't asked? There's one here. Great.
Hi, Aaron Munn from Woodend. Just was interested in the focus on shared decision making in some of the frameworks of Reconciliation Victoria there, and I was wondering if that's at times in tension with the concept of self-determination, and whether either of you have some comment on sort of how that's managed, and whether there's some areas where we need to give up that shared decision making, particularly in a local council sort of context.
You happy for me to
Please.
take
Yeah,
over?
yeah, please.
I guess one of the good fortunes I had in developing the RAPs was also working alongside, Aboriginal advisory committees in RAPs and watching, I guess, this type of thing that it would always happen. And I guess back in the early 2000s, working with the likes of DATSIC, the Darebin Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Community Council was a really powerful council at the time. A lot of the uncles and aunts had been Aboriginal change makers. They'd been part of this, fight for a really long time, and they'd come out of the heartland of the Aborigines Advancement League. And the one thing that local governments had sort of struggled with was understanding that Aboriginal governance and, what would there would be a real natural leadership that would occur in that landscape where the local governments had this sort of view of almost trying to impose, but all of our committees work like this. We've got our disability committee here, we've got our other committee here, and they were trying to put this one-size-fits model around these really powerful leaders and advisors who had their life journey wasn't going to be put into this box. And so we, in the terms of reference, allowing those First Peoples leaders to lead what that terms of reference would look like, again putting that cultural necessary language and inclusive language around what that terms of reference would look like. Also getting the local councils to get into this process of understanding the heavy commitment that all of these elders had in all areas of their life and commitments to their families. So these sitting fee payments still hadn't been recognised as something that needed to occur to have this ongoing participation by these really strong leaders. So we were, forging a pathway early in the 2000s to get sitting fee payments even through for these elders. And it would take almost 2 years of going through this process with council just to get these sitting fees in place. Times have changed dramatically since then, but also we had to go through processes of sitting down with the councillors at the time, allowing this change of process to watch how the governance would naturally unfold, who were already the respected leaders at that table deemed by the community themselves, and how council could actually benefit more from sitting back and listening and being part of that circle rather than sitting over the top and wanting to actually say, oh, this is how we run our normal committee meetings. And when councillors did take that step back, they said, oh, we're getting so much cultural learning in here, we'd prefer now not to be the chairs of the meeting. And this stand back began to occur, and the change happened where it was like, oh, we'll share the chair meeting, one meeting. It went from we'll share the chair to no, we'll let Uncle chair, and that's when we knew the change had occurred. So that might give you a bit of a slight glimpse into what's been happening in the local government landscape in the last 20 odd years.
Yeah, great response, and I can certainly appreciate that it's sometimes not just a one-size-fits-all approach, but this is our timeline that we usually operate on, and we've mapped it all out, and we want outcomes along this sort of timeline, and it just doesn't work, and we're not being reflective and doing that in partnership, and you need to keep an open mind and be flexible and allow the conversation to be a bit messy, because it gets you to a better place. Brent, can you give a sense of that in terms of the sort of shared understanding, shared governance? What and we're thinking, we've got some live examples in the show at the moment about opportunities for shared governance of culturally important places. What have you seen or heard or thought of that might work, or what we might need to consider?
Yeah, I think Nicole's hit most things on the head, and it's obviously something you're dealing with and work with every day. But I'll probably echo, the cultural load that a lot of our senior community members can be kind of wearing. It's like that invisible backpack of things in their life that are going on. So that's something to be aware of. But I agree, yeah, it's still a shifting thing in regards to paying community for their time, and these gold nuggets that you're going to take away from, setting up that kind of initial terms of reference or guiding principles or strategic plan or RAP, whatever that is. Get that right and really genuinely sit with community and listen. And as you said, it can be messy. It doesn't have to be quick and happen straight away. But then it's probably that flip piece around the organisation or the council driving a lot of it, and not, as I think you said, someone said in the example before, one person not doing everything in the organisation, one Aboriginal person doing everything. So that's where it's on the allies and the individual. So I think it can be a balance. That's healthy. I would say at the top, try to get kind of that collaboration or leadership from your First Nations kind of people that are supporting, and then it really is on the organisation to drive it. But as you said, have that accountability and check in to make sure that, for example, cultural safety, we might think we're culturally safe, but are we asking our users or the people in our service, is this culturally safe? So, but thanks, Nicole.
Yep. And that just to touch on exactly what Brent said, and that's where we check in on your RAP progress and reporting, is not to necessarily check in with how you think that you're doing, but actually to check in with your First Peoples partners that are working with you. Allow them that honesty in how you are tracking with your RAP, and even just to take it on board if it's not the response that you expected. And that's one thing as an honest, RAP coordinator, that's the first thing I do, is go back to that source and ask respectfully for the First Peoples partners on the RAP to give the report card. Because that's who we're reconciling.
So you're saying we can't mark our own homework? Is that what you're saying, Nicole?
Most councils do.
It's those the non-15 group, Point well made. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I've learned a lot tonight. I hope you have. We've had two terrific and thoughtful speakers in Brent and Nicole. Please put your hands together. We've just got a little gift from the Macedon Rangers to thank you for coming out on such a brisk night, and so just bear with me.
Thank you. Get some flowers from Mrs.
Right, we got Nicole.
Oh, thank you.
And Brent. So this well and truly sets us up for next week's community roundtable, where we as a community can discuss what we can do to progress reconciliation, what's real for us, how we can make it real, and as the Deputy Mayor said at the start, and as we've said throughout, we need to be brave and make change. And it always starts with us, doesn't start with other people. You can do little things that make a change. So I think that's a good reflection for me and probably all of us about when we think about Reconciliation Week, whether it's within the week or beyond the week, what are the things, even the little things that we can do that can make a difference in this area. If you haven't done so already, you can register for the community roundtable next week on Council's website, or maybe another positive thing to come out of the pandemic about you can do it via QR codes on the posters in the foyer, and I think we all know how to use QR codes now. So thank you for coming out and supporting this event, hearing from our terrific speakers. Take care getting home, and thank you for being with us tonight. Good night.